because I remembered that God made man in his own image. So I wanted to be remade in the image of St. Anthony. So I poured out my heart and I was praying to him here, standing in front of this altar. Then I made a metania to seal my prayer with obedience. As I bent down, I thought that the other priests had left. Really, I thought they had gone out of the cave. So I bent down and my heart was full of this prayer. And as I made my metania, I heard behind me a word, an echo. It wasn't in my head, it was outside my head, it was behind me. And as I made my metania, I heard this word, minor shiri. I can remember it echoing now, I can still hear it. It's 20 years ago, but I can still hear it. And I didn't know what it meant. And as I stood up, I looked around and there was nobody there. The two priests had gone. So it wasn't them who were speaking. So I knew that this is a word of life. We read about in the Paradise of the Holy Fathers that any young man who is seeking to live in the desert, he would ask the older father, "Father, give me a word of life." And this word of life, I got it from St. Anthony in this cave. When he told me this word, minor shiri, I didn't understand it. So I turned back to the altar and I prayed again in the same words. And when I made my metania in front of the altar, I heard the same word behind, as if it was echoing in the back of the cave, minor shiri. Well, by that time I was awake to the fact that this was the word of the saint. And so I started to repeat it, minor shiri, minor shiri, minor shiri. And I kissed the altar and I left. I went with the two fathers and we descended to the monastery. When we arrived in the monastery, I met Father Dioscorus, who speaks English. And I asked him, "Father, what is the meaning of minor shiri?" And he looked at me for a moment, then he said, "This is Coptic." I said, "Yes, what does it mean?" He said, "Well, it's from the Tesbeha. We say, Hail to St. Anthony Pi minor shiri, the one who loves his sons, or who loves his disciples." When he told me this, you can imagine how warm my heart became. St. Anthony used a Coptic word which means that he is the one who loves his sons, that he is thinking of me as his son. This was for me the greatest answer which I could possibly get.
Sexual sins. There is so much confusion about human sexuality in our age today, perhaps more so in our age today than any other. First of all, we may say in the animal kingdom, sex is for procreation, reproduction. There are seasons when animals may reproduce. But this is not the nature of sexuality for human beings. Human sexuality is something far greater than simply reproduction. This is a purpose far more mysterious and greater than anything in the animal kingdom. Sex within marriage is blessed. The mystery of the marriage bond, the union of a man and woman, is such that it reflects something of Christ's union with his church, his bride. And sex plays a part in this. And of course we must apply a certain degree of discernment when we say these things. But sex inside marriage is completely different to sex outside of marriage. There is a great example to give us an insight into how this is so different, how an action or behavior or something we do can be very different in one context to another. Think of a soldier on the battlefield. A soldier who may sadly have to kill to defend his home, his nation, and so on. A soldier may kill on the battlefield in warfare and be honored for his bravery. But if a man wanders around and kills on the streets during peacetime, it is a great evil, and he will be locked away at least. So killing on the battlefield, though a great tragedy may be very different to killing in the streets. And so it is with sex. Sex inside marriage is blessed. In his letter to the Hebrews, St. Paul says, it is a blessing. There is no sin, no defilement in the marriage bed. But God will judge adulterers and fornicators. Sex outside of marriage defiles us both in body and spirit. It defiles this honorable representation of the union between Christ and his church. And so all sex of any kind outside of marriage defiles us in both body and soul, defiles the very image of the love between Christ and his bride, the church. Let us be clear. Fornication wounds the soul just as much as adultery and all the other sexual sins. But Christ sets a higher calling than simply not to sin in behavior, in our actions. Very often you will hear people talk about the demand of the Old Testament, the laws of Deuteronomy and Leviticus and so on, as though they were far more demanding than the calling to be a Christian. And this is a mistake, because here in this example of sexual sin, we see Christ setting a higher standard, a calling to a greater thing than even the Old Testament set before us. For Christ says to us, whosoever looks at a woman in the street with lust commits adultery in his heart. So Christ says, look, God isn't just interested in your behavior, but as we've been saying throughout this Lent, God is concerned with the condition of our heart. A reminder to us that when we fast, when we pray, when we prostrate, these things are good, but God looks to the very nature, the condition of our heart. And so it is with sexual passions. God calls us to be purified in the heart, not to allow these desires and passions to dwell, not to feed them. And of course we are surrounded by a culture that seeks to profit from these passions. Advertising, movies, music will cultivate, stimulate these kinds of passions in order to sell us things, in order to stir up a passion that they then promise to gratify. We're being manipulated by all of these media, and we must guard ourselves, protect our eyes and our ears from allowing these influences to enter us, because they will stir up the heart to evil.